Hey, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, February 5th, 2025. Um, Tonight we have Chris Haft. Chris wrote a wonderful new biography on Willie Mccovey, which he will discuss with us. Just some housekeeping. First of all, I'd like to welcome back Giant Royalty who's here tonight, Pat Gallagher. Pat, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Always welcome here, you know that.
Thank you.
In a couple of weeks, we're going to have the next meeting will be in 2 weeks from tomorrow with Robert Cohen. Robert wrote a book, The 50 Greatest New York / San Francisco Giants. So that should be a great debate. He has it broken down, and it should be a wonderful evening. Happy birthday today to Al Worthington, the oldest living New York Giant, who turned 96 today.
Oh my God.
So, and a happy belated birthday to our own Steve Rawchild, who is, I believe, 40. Happy birthday, Steve. Today, as Norm mentioned, it is 2525 Barry Bonds Day in San Francisco. I'm sure that went off well. Nothing can beat what we did last year here with 2424 and Willie Mays Day. So, before we turn it over to Chris, Norm wanted to say something regarding John Leodonikas. So, Norm, floor is yours.
So John invited me to speak with his group. It's going to be on Sunday, February 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. The name of the show that day will be The Sweet Spot on Patreon with Norm Coleman. And he's going to interview me about my collection. And he wants me to tell stories. I sent him pictures of he said, send pictures of your favorite things in the collection. So I sent him a bunch of pictures, and he's going to pick the ones he wants to use and then ask me questions about the different things that I sent. And so he told me I can invite anybody I want. And so, and I told him that Gary wanted to send the invite to everyone in our group, and he said he would love that. And so I will send a link to Gary, and then he'll send it out to the group. And anyone who wants to come, you're welcome to come. And you'll be seeing it live. And then I don't understand how this works. It'll be on a Zoom thing. But then afterwards, he's putting it on Patreon, which I don't know anything about except for it's a site that you have to belong to or to pay in order to see the stuff. And so if you want to see it without paying, come to the live one. And I wouldn't recommend paying to see it. But so that's it. My feelings won't be hurt if you don't come. But I'd be delighted to see some familiar faces there too.
Thanks,
That's it.
Norm.
Thanks, Gary.
Anybody else with any news they want to share before we get started? Okay. Tonight, I want to reintroduce Chris Haft. Chris was one of our first guests in 2020 when we first started Google Meets or Zooming, and when I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So he's one of the few that was not recorded by us until we figured out what to do. So now we know what to do. So without any further ado, this is Chris's new book. It just came out yesterday. Willie Mccovey, A Giant Among Giants, The Baseball Life of Willie Mccovey. Why bring it up here in a New York club? Well, first of all, Mccovey was signed by the New York Giants. And second of all, one of the most beloved players and people of the Giants franchise, and worthy of being in New York Giants or San Francisco Giants. Just an unbelievable person and one of my all-time greats. Let's all welcome Chris Haft. Chris, the floor is yours.
Honorary captain for the inaugural season of the San Jose Sharks in the National Hockey League. I'm sure Pat Gallagher, who's out there, he probably remembers that, but I knew nothing about that. So it was a thrill just to hear tales of him going out to Sharks games and wearing teal clothing and all that, and being the honorary being their honorary captain. They chose him precisely for the reasons you might think. They wanted somebody who represented the Bay Area, who represented well, and nobody came close to filling the bill but Willie Mack.
I'm sure you realize that nobody had written anything. So was this a goal of yours to get this done? Did you try to do it, as quickly as possible? Talk to us about that.
Yes, I tried to do it as quickly as possible. It's a darn good thing because that thing called COVID struck, and unfortunately God took away a lot of people I wanted to talk to. Um, I had all but set up an interview with Joe Morgan when he passed away. Um, I'm still haunted by the voicemail he left me. He said, "I want to help you. I just need to take care of a couple things first, and then we'll talk." That instance never came. Um, Bob Gibson passed away. People I talked to, which was and later on passed away. They're on my list. Unfortunately, it was just in that sense, it was a almost depressing project. But fortunately, I was able to talk to enough people to get the get enough meat and potatoes, so to speak, together to do the book.
Before I have other people ask you questions, the one thing that I really liked when I saw the book, and I know Pat Gallagher is on tonight, you have a listing of all of the Willie Mack recipients. Can you tell us about that award for those who do not know about this Willie Mack Award?
It's not meant to be the most valuable player on the team. Um, the award is given to the most inspirational player on the team, the one who most closely exemplifies Willie Mccovey, the spirit with which he played, the effort he gave day to day, night to night. Pat Gallagher, who has honored us with his presence on this call, I saw earlier. Pat came up with the idea for the award. Um, and Willie was kind of forced to retire during the 1980 season, and as Pat told me later on, he didn't really get a proper goodbye. And this was one way, not only to honor a present giant, but also one of the greatest San Francisco giants, New York or San Francisco, of all time. Maybe more popular, at least in that instance, than Mays was. I remember Willie Mack's last game-winning hit, a pinch double against the Dodgers in the ninth inning of a tie-scored candlestick, and the ovation that the fans sustained for Willie went on for about 10 minutes. I'm not exaggerating, close to 10 minutes. I was in the crowd that day, and we weren't going to stop until he came out and tipped his cap for the curtain call. And that was just one instance of the adulation that people reserved for Willie.
Chris, I hope you don't mind. Pat, would you mind telling us where this idea came from?
Well, yeah.
I know you mentioned it earlier before we
No,
started.
yeah. Hey, Chris, congratulations on the book, Chris. You know what? It was Willie it was decided that Willie was going to retire, and it wasn't, obviously it wasn't quite the way he wanted to do it. It was mid-season, and he wanted to play in 4 decades. So I guess this was in 1980, and so I was the marketing director at the time. So the idea was, well, what can we do for him? And we can schedule a day and all that stuff is mid-season, and so we decided. I mean, this was one that was out there. There was no sort of award for the most inspirational player. So the Willie Mack Award was really born as something that that we thought Willie might like, because he's a very intimidating guy to look at him, but when you were his teammate or when you were around him, he was a regular guy. I mean, meaning he was very approachable, and but he was such an intimidating presence that. But once that's one of the reasons why he was popular with his teammates, is because they realized. I mean, he was always the judge in the kangaroo court. He was the judge, and he didn't speak when he said something. It was generally worth listening to. Sort of a man of few words, and anyway, so it's, and one of the great things, at least gratifying to me, is after the ward was established, and he really was proud of it and wanted to be there. And every year that he could make it, and some of those years was tough for him to get around, he actually showed up for the presentation, and the award winner got a chance to spend some time with him. And, as the time goes by, some of the younger players who got it, you weren't quite sure if they knew who Willie Mccovey was, but which sounds crazy. But anyway, it's wound up being a wonderful thing, and it's always good when you get voted on by the members of your own team, not by any other group. So I don't know, that I think it was gratifying to me, but it was more gratifying to Willie to have that kind of a thing named after him, because he always, let's face it, he played under the shadow of the other Willie, and those two guys were actually a lot closer than people thought. But it was there were two great players that just happened to be there at the same time.
Right. Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Chris, I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book, and it's wonderful. I mean, the 4-for-4 game, I think we listened to it in New York because it was early on. A lot of the Giant games were broadcast on the radio. I had asked you about that, and you handled it well. I did not realize his closeness to Ted Williams, and they both were 4-decade players, and I ended up with the same amount of home runs. I also didn't realize that Mays was not at Mccovey's induction. We all liked Mays. He was our guy. He also was not at DeRoche's induction. And speaking to Chris DeRoche about that several times, Chris felt Mays wasn't going to come because he wasn't going to present the plaque or speak in behalf of DeRoche. And I said, Chris, you're his son. And I don't know if you remember when Chris DeRoche accepted the honor for his dad, he couldn't even get through the speech. He started crying, and luckily the rain day was right there, and she took the mic. The last thing, you have something like this in the book, but not this exactly. Fergie Jenkins lived here in Anthem. He now moved back to Texas, and I had him as a speaker a number of times. The first time he came, one of the questions that was asked, who did you fear the most? And he ended up telling the Willie Mccovey story. He said, we were at San Francisco in the hotel. I was going to pitch that night, and the phone rings. And Ernie Banks was his roommate. He picks up the phone and says, Fergie, it's Willie Mccovey's limousine driver. He's picking you up. Wants to make sure you get to the ballpark. That was a big story. Congratulations. Wonderful book. I'll be finished probably by the weekend. Keep up the good work, pal.
Thank you, Steve. When I used to go to Shea Stadium, when Willie Mccovey swung and missed, and it landed in the catcher's mitt, there was just an amazing sound of the ball being caught, and also the Met fans cheering because they were so scared of him that he made out. So. Mars, you're up.
I don't know what happened there.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Chris, thank you for your presence, for your presentation. I wanted to mention the Giants had a dilemma where they had two first basemen, Mccovey and Cepeda. Cepeda was accused of complaining about his knee, and so he went to the Cardinals. Can you imagine the two of them remaining on the Giants throughout their greatest years? And also about the popularity. Players coming from New York to San Francisco weren't nearly as popular as the ones that started with the San Francisco version. Can you elaborate on that? And then my third question is, or statement is, if anybody owned Don Drysdale, it was Willie Mccovey.
Yeah.
I don't know of any batter that dominated a pitcher more than him. So can you elaborate on the popularity for indigenous San Francisco Giants and McCovey owning Don Drysdale?
Oh, sorry, what the first question or issue was?
The popularity of indigenous San Francisco Giants
Oh,
versus the players that came from New York.
well, people certainly embraced that's 1958 team quite a bit, quite warmly. People want to think of these players as their own players, and as you probably heard, that hurt Willie Mays among longtime fans because possibly the greatest center fielder of all time, Joe DiMaggio, had grown up in San Francisco. People were very enamored of him of course, even after he stopped playing. And then also in that same 1958 season, as you mentioned, Orlando Cepeda, was great guns all year, won the Rookie of the Year award in National League that year. And even though McCovey was a homegrown product, the following season, 59, yes, the fans were right behind him all the way, at least that first season. Then in 1960, when McCovey hit 238, people weren't really all that excited about McCovey all of a sudden. They want somebody who could excel all the time. And Cepeda at that juncture, he was the guy who excited them the most. If a lot of times Orlando had to play out of position to accommodate McCovey in the lineup. McCovey could play only first base. Orlando could play third or left, although he did either very well and didn't want to play at either third or left. He wanted to play, behind at first base or left, or he wanted to play where he was closest to the fans. That was first base. But people still took it hard when Cepeda was traded in May 1966, even after McCovey had established himself as a superior performer.
And what about do you know of any other hitter that dominated a pitcher like McCovey dominated Don Drysdale that had better stats, especially in the power numbers, than McCovey did over Don Drysdale?
It was ridiculous those first few years, from 57 through maybe 63, 64. It was just he hit close to 500 with I think double figures in home runs and 27 RBIs off Don Drysdale. The biggest instance of McCovey's edge over Drysdale, I guess, was the biggest instance was in August of 1962 when the Giants were lingering just a few games behind the Dodgers in the National League race, and McCovey hit a pinch hit home run off Drysdale to put them ahead, and they eventually won that game. It was a huge game, given the state of the pennant race at the time. But actually, after that, believe it or not, McCovey kind of cooled off a little bit against Drysdale, but he still finished his career with fabulous numbers, 300 something. And again, all those home runs and RBI.
So the question I have: did any batter in Major League history, did any batter dominate a pitcher in power numbers more than Willie McCovey? So let's say Ty Cobb against Walter Johnson or whatever.
I need to jump on Baseball Reference and do some comparisons, but believe it or not, there were some other instances. There have been other instances of that kind of domination, if you can believe that.
Thank you, Mars.
Thank you, Chris.
Bill Clink, you're up.
Chris, thank you very much for bringing back some truly warm and fuzzy memories. I love Willie Mays, but I don't really have the warm and fuzzy memories of him that I do for Willie McCovey. I treasure any conversation I can now remember with my mother but I can remember on July 30th, it was obviously not school time. I was out playing. And when I came home late that afternoon, my mother was excited to tell me about the Giants' new rookie and that he had gone 4 for 4 and that he had 2 triples and 2 singles. And she was truly excited about that. In a separate note, a year later, she sent me a postcard when I was at YMCA camp telling me about a pitcher who had broken in on her birthday on July 19th. We all know him to be Juan Marichal. And I was going to ask you this, and I don't know if your studies have shown this. Have we ever had a guy break in, get eight get eight total bases, go 4 for 4 against a future Hall of Famer? I don't, I kind of say, I don't know if that ever happened, breaking in that way with, 4 for 4 and eight total bases. Chris, I don't know if your studies had shown that, but wow. I mean, that memory that mom brought back to me, just unbelievable, Chris. Do you know of anything like that or anyone?
Well, that's the thing. Robin Roberts was no ordinary pitcher, as you pointed out, and I think people maybe probably people my age and I'm 65. People my age and younger don't fully grasp the impact of being able to have that kind of debut against that kind of pitcher. I was talking to Gary Matthews, who of course came, baseball generations after Robin Roberts, but he was, but Gary Matthews did become, very knowledgeable student of Phillies lore, being a broadcaster for the team all that time, and for quite a while. And but playing wise, he was closer to where Mccovey was, and Matthews went into it. And I was talking to Gary at some point a few years ago. It was for the book, so it was 2 or 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Gary was very insistent on the fact that don't sell anybody short in that opening game tale, surrounding Mccovey. Mccovey was great, but Matthews pointed out, don't forget, Robin Roberts was a super pitcher, and the fact that Mccovey could do this, have that kind of debut was nothing short of astounding. The next night at at Seal Stadium, the Giants opened a series, and they had to turn away 4,000 people at the door, at the gates, because so many people were instantly curious and fascinated, about Mccovey. I just love that image, all these people walking up, running to the ticket booths, and having to, it's sad actually. I don't appreciate the memory for sadistic reasons, but it's just intriguing to me how right away people were on to Mccovey, so to speak.
Along with Charles, I don't know if anyone else was present who was so fortunate. Charles and I were both fortunate to attend the induction ceremonies for Willie. I saw 2 induction ceremonies in my life, one for Willie and one for Leo DeRocher. And I've got the yearbook, and there's 75 autographs of Hall of Famers in this. The most important, of course, is Willie Mccovey in that. And I'd be glad to make a copy of that cover and send it to you along with, I don't know how many close-ups you have of him when he was actually being inducted. There's one here with where he's making his speech right there that I took. I was really able to get up very close. In '86, things were a lot different. When I came back in '94, you couldn't get near the stage. And I'll send that to you. And then this one is one of Peter Uberoth presenting him with his Hall of Fame plaque there. So those are two things that I treasure. And if you wish, through Gary, Chris, I'll be glad to send you a copy of each one of those. You deserve it for what you've done. I'm looking forward to buying this book and reading it because, uh, I love Willie Mays. I mean, but he was he was so far up there. He was like a star, so many light years away. It was like Willie McCovey, Willie Mack was almost like more approachable. That he was, and that he, like I said, there's more warm and fuzzy feelings with him, I guess. Uh, and I just want to thank you for writing the book, and I'll be glad to, through Gary, get copies of those to you, Chris, if you'd like. It'd be my thanks and my testimony to what you've done, putting together the first of, well, it's the first. It undoubtedly will be the greatest of the Willie McCovey books. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all that sentiment. And, Willie's one of the few guys who could generate that sentiment among fans. He was Roger Angel told me a story late in the 1978 season, which, as you all probably will remember, was a very resurgent season for the Giants. Roger was interviewing Willie Mack about about the year and how close the Giants had come, but again fell short in their bid to make the postseason. And Willie said to Roger, I really feel sorry for the fans. They're the helpless ones in this whole picture, because at least we can go up there and have something, make a we can do something for the team. We're in that position. The fans are helpless. They can't do a thing. And Roger was struck by how genuine Willie was, in talking about the fans. He truly cared about how you and me and everybody else felt. I mean, it was even though he didn't talk much about it, that was he did to Roger that day, and that was the way he was.
Chris, I want to say I am so thankful that we were able to get this fixed so we could hear your input, really. And Steve Rothschild, from Brooklyn, Willie McCovey was considered the people's Church, right?
Well, when we were on the field that time, Gary, I don't know if you remember, Logan was schlepping a bag around. That was one of Willie McCovey's equipment bags that he got from him when old man Logan was in the clubhouse. Chris, I'm surprised you didn't mention, and it doesn't take away from the book. Murphy was the first bat boy on the visiting side. Roy McKercher, who Gary and I were fortunate enough to meet, he's passed away since, was the Giants bat boy, and it was a coin flip. Roy McKercher and Mike Murphy were outside Seal Stadium before the season started, and Logan came out in his rasping New York voice. "What are you guys doing here?" Looking for jobs. And they were hired on a coin flip. And, heads I win, tails you lose. And McKercher, I guess, had the right, whether it was tails or heads, whatever, he won. He became the bat boy for 3 years, actually 4 years, 58-9, 60-61 for the home team, while Murphy was on the visiting side. I know you put Patrick Quinlan in there. Must have been a close buddy of yours who lives out here now. Did you know Roy McKercher? Did that name come up at all?
I've heard the name, and I've heard stories from people like you about him, but I did not. I have a vague memory of possibly meeting him at before the 97 All-Star game, but my memory is a little bit vague on that.
Okay, that's fine.
And if any of you don't know, Chris wrote a book on Mike Murphy, so you could purchase that as well. Frank Sexton, did you still have a question?
Yes, a recollection. I remember a couple of my buddies and I, and occasionally my dad, would go down to the Polo Grounds in 1962 whenever the Giants were in town. We went to the first game, and that was an extremely emotional evening. And I remember it may have been that day we got there early and we watched the Giants take batting practice. We were sort of vaguely aware of McCovey because he wasn't in New York. And we watched him hit 5, 6, 7, 8 balls out of the Polo Grounds over the right field upper decks. We couldn't believe it. My dad turned to me and said, "I've never seen a baseball hit that way. Not Mantle, not Williams, not anybody. I've seen a golf ball hit that way by Arnie Palmer, but that's about it." So that's what I remember about Willie McCovey. Many years later, a cousin of mine claimed that he had purchased a car from Willie McCovey in San Francisco. Willie was selling cars in the winter. And I said, that can't be. That can't possibly be. And sure enough, I Googled Willie McCovey, and there was a picture of him in a dealership selling cars when baseball players didn't make all that much money. So, and with a big grin on his face. What I'm really looking forward to about that book is I know virtually nothing about Willie McCovey, the man, but I've never seen a photograph of him without a smile. You know, he must have been a spectacular human being. So I really, really thank you for putting this treasure in our hands.
I don't know if I have enough in there about him personally to satisfy everybody, but I wanted to try to get some personal stuff in there. So yes, I have the chapter on his youth and growing up in Mobile. Some stuff on him when after he retired. Again, the being the Sharks honorary captain, possibly saving Randy Cross's career. Randy Cross, the great 49er lineman, hurt himself in one of those sports challenge things that were so popular in the late 70s, early 80s. Randy shredded his knee on some silly, meaningless competition, and his leg, that is, and McCovey held Cross's leg in place while until the paramedics could come and take him to the hospital. So, Willie is memorable for more reasons than one. I'll tell you what, one thing I remember about his power, I remember going to a game, I was 13 or 14, and it was a typical night at Candlestick, gray, wind blowing like heck, perfect conditions, of course. And I remember walking in just as Willie was finishing up his batting practice round, and he was swinging as easily as if he was working on his 9-iron or something. At the golf course, he was swinging so easily, and yet the ball was rocketing out of there. And
like that day at the Polo Grounds.
This is a batting practice pitcher pitching, so of course, Willie has a supply of all the power, and boy, did he! Like I say, just such an easy swing, terrific power, and that only comes when you have great timing, really. So not just strength. And so it always got to me how how good a hitter he was, not just a slugger. He could hit.
Chris, I always felt that his defense was very underrated. I thought he was a very good first baseman, and I mean that's where Stretch came from.
Oh, for sure, that's where Stretch came from, and Wes Parker was the I guess leading defensive first baseman, if you will, during that late 60s, early 70s. And McCovey genuinely felt that he was Wes Parker's equal as a defensive first baseman. And, the stats will show maybe that he wasn't. But his teammates sure back him up. And if it was a quote for style points, it was tough to beat Willie Mack. He'd take infield before the game, and he used to throw 3/4 or even sidearm a lot, and he just looked so good. always looked good, no matter what
He
he
was
was
he
doing.
was
He seemed
just
like he looked good.
he was just classy. There's no other word to
Yeah.
describe how he played effortless. When he hit home runs, his elbows were going. Great. Harvey, you're up, Harvey. Harvey had a question, or you passed?
Well, I've been vacillating back and forth, but the comment about batting practice at the Polo Grounds in the first year the Giants came back, I was 16, and we were sitting. My dad, my brother, and I was seated in the upper right field stands for batting practice. I don't remember the balls going over the roof, but I remember the balls off Willie Mccovey's bat coming into where we were sitting, and it was dodging incoming. It was dramatic. The balls were buzzing in, and I swear they were almost breaking up the seats. They were wooden seats in those days, and he was a powerful hitter. And I loved when he would come to bat. I was a Willie Mays guy also, but Willie Mack was a great compliment to Willie Mays and the Giants. Thanks, Chris, for your book. Thanks for your persistence in presenting your talk. You have overcome a lot of things, including the technology of the New York Giants Preservation Society Zoom.
Thank you, Harvey. Charles.
Willie McCovey was sort of my guy. I fell in love with baseball in 1978. I just loved him. Your book is incredible. I've actually already finished it. I think because I ordered it directly from the publisher like 3 months ago. And it came and I read it and I was like, I just loved it. So much stuff I didn't know about him, which was just incredible to read. I wanted to find out, Chris, are you doing a signing at any local bookstores in San Francisco?
I'm sorry, is there a book tour? Is that what you said?
Yeah, are you doing any book signings at any bookstores in the city in San Francisco?
Nothing's been scheduled or nailed down yet. I know I'll be going to a bookstore and with the pastor of my church. He'll keep me on the straight and narrow that night. In Montclair, up near in the Oakland Hills.
Okay.
There's a couple of bookstores in that village there, and I'll be in one of them. I just don't know when. It hasn't been set up yet. So things like that are being organized as we speak.
What's the name of the bookstore, just so I know?
The book is called A Giant Among Giants.
No, the bookstore.
Baseball Life with Willie McCovey, and you can order it on Amazon. You can order it through the major booksellers like Books Inc. And you can go to the publisher's website, Nebraska University Press, and get it there.
Do you know what the name of the bookstore is?
Oh, the bookstore that I'll be going to in Montclair?
Yeah.
I'll be very honest, I don't know.
Okay.
But you've got some. You bring up something that I should be scolded about. That's that's the only sure thing I've got now. But I know I'll be talking to, although it would be another Zoom thing, the local Sabre chapter.
Awesome.
Do you go to many games?
Oh yeah, I go every year. I go to the Willie Mack Award. I'm working on an autograph project. I'm doing Willie Mack Award winners by decade, which I finished the 80s one, less Jose Uribe, sadly. The 90s one, I need Steve Bedrosian, who doesn't sign anymore. The 2000s, I need Matt Cain. And then the 2020s, I need Matt Chapman and Thero Estrada. So I'm working my way through it.
Thank you, Charles. Well, here's a guy who does have every Willie Mack Award signature. Mr. Norm, you are up.
Hey, Chris. I don't expect you to remember me, but I remember you because I met you at the Willie Mays Celebration of Life, and it was a thrill to meet you. I don't have any questions, but I was taking notes today because as Bill Klink said, having you here and telling your stories about Willie Mack and everyone else talking to you about him just brings back so many memories. The first thing I want to say is I don't love Willie Mays more than I love Willie Mccovey. I love them differently because they were different people. Mays had the charisma, and he was potentially the greatest player of all time. Mccovey was the most powerful hitter of his day, and he was a gentle giant. And I got to meet him a few times, and he was just a gentleman. And as someone said, the smile on his face and the warmth. I mean, he was quiet, but he was warm at the same time. And that's a very rare quality. As far as Mccovey at first base, he is underrated. Things don't remember how he scooped. We had very bad shortstops in the 60s. No one scooped the ball out of the dirt better than Willie Mccovey. No one was more smooth at making that throw from first to second to get the runner from first at second than Mccovey. He was good on pop-ups. He was just smooth in everything he did at the base. And so he is underrated there. Someone mentioned Mccovey blasting the ball in the polo grounds in batting practice. Well, in the 60s, I went to batting practice at Candlestick Park, and Mccovey would consistently hit the balls into the parking lot because the park wasn't enclosed, and you had the bleacher section, all this open area, and the players' parking lot. And we would always joke about how many players' cars' windows are going to be broken today. I mean, he just was so powerful. The one thing I want to give as a takeaway here in terms of Mccovey and how special he was at Candlestick, before they enclosed the ballpark, the bleachers were separate from the rest of the park, and they were like in sections, but they were not next to the cyclone fence that surrounded the outfield. And so everyone's batting in the game and everyone's sitting in the bleachers, and Mccovey comes up, and all the kids in the bleachers are now have their faces against the cyclone fence because they're all waiting for that ball to come out. And it's still, I'm tingling right now and thinking and picturing all of this stuff happening. That's because of Willie Mccovey, and you bring this to life, Chris, and so I thank you for that.
Norm,
Well,
no, that was great, Norm. Go get your tissue, Norm.
You're telling
It
me.
was a gift from God, Willie Mccovey.
Before I ask Bill Klink to wrap it up, there we go. Anybody else who wants to speak? Jim Mully, you're up.
Thanks. A couple of you mentioned 1978, and that was the first time I went to San Francisco. And I went there in May of 78, and I was there for that Dodger series and the Mike Ivey home run. And there was a lot of excitement around Mike Ivey, and I felt almost a little sad because Willie was probably 40 years old in 78. And I thought the fans were really shifting, like they wanted to see Ivey rather than Mccovey. And I was wondering if you covered any of that issue in your book, because you did mention that 78, you talked about 78 and how good he felt about it with the fans. But I was wondering if he had any kind of a sadness in 78, because I did feel almost a little uncomfortable with the reception and that Mike Ivey was getting at the time.
Hello?
Yeah, Chris, did you hear the question?
I missed that part. I missed, I think, the key part of the sentence.
Well, it was about 1978 and the Mike Ivey, Willie Mccovey situation where fans were really kind of pulling and wanting to see more of Ivey. Is that something that hurt Willie, or how did he deal with that?
That was Willie did have the misfortune of being involved in these triangles at the start of his career and the end of it. The Ivy thing. The job was Ivy's to win after the 78 season, but indeed in 79 he hit 27 home runs, I think. But after that, he showed that, and he admitted that he couldn't handle the stress of being a big leaguer, and so that was pretty much it for him. I mean, he never was an effective player after the '79 season. Kind of a shame, but the Giants had a lot of hopes pinned on him after '78. And I mean, there were years. Willie, I think, actually played as much, if not more, than Ivy in the last year and a half or so. Even though, let's face it, he wasn't very mobile. He was no longer mobile at first base. And if here's a pitching-oriented team needing, probably want to maximize your defense, and Willie, as much as we all loved him, couldn't provide that at the end.
Yeah, when he was finished, we wound up getting the wrong Murray brother. We got Rich Murray instead of Eddie Murray. So before we close out with Bill and Steve, does anybody want to make a comment who has not spoken yet? Okay, Bill and then Steve, wrap it up. Bill, go ahead. Nice and fast.
Real quickly, life is something we've all experienced where it's not always on an upward basis. There's ups and downs, and for Willie, certainly the 1960 season was a down season. And in July of that year, it reached probably the lowest point that Willie experienced his entire career when he was returned to Tacoma. I've never got a definitive answer on this. I know it's out there somewhere. I couldn't find it on Baseball Reference. But the best way I can figure, when Willie got sent down to Tacoma, they brought up Juan Marichal. Am I wrong in thinking that? Was that this? They had to send somebody down in July when Willie went down.
Yes.
They had to put somebody up, well, on the 19th or the 17th or 16th. Marichal came up. Talk about trading two Hall of Famers in one transaction within your one organization. Am I wrong on this?
No, you're not wrong. When Willie went down, Juan came up. The reason I found that out was just talking to Willie about it. Really, I said I think I was doing a Marichal feature for MLB.com and my employers, and I asked Willie, who was so good about talking about his old teammates, Willie, what do you remember about Juan Marichal's debut? And he said, "Well, Chris," and that little drawl of his or whatever. That's a funny question you asked me because I was the guy who went down when Juan came up, and you're sitting there laughing, and it was worth laughing about. But just to tell it, I guess maybe you can in your mind hear the almost humor with which he had just acknowledged this fact. So yeah, he did come down when Juan came up, but they sure paired together for a lot of victories over the years. It's really like to tell me, when Juan pitched, that was win day.
That's right.
I love that. That competitive side showing. When Juan pitched, that was win day.
That was a win day.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure was, wasn't it?
Thank you.
Steve, why don't you take us home?
Yeah, you said that in the book a few times. I got a kick out of that. Frank, the one with the New York Giant hat, you talked about that Friday night game in the Polo Grounds the first year in '62. I think McCovey hit 2 home runs that Friday night. I don't know if they left the ballpark, but the next day Stengel was interviewed. Which side of the street should I play Mr. McCovey on today? Yeah. That was one thing. The second thing.
That was that game. You're right.
Definitely. All right. The first game back. I don't know how many of you guys have ever been to the Casa Grande Hotel where the Giants trained. The swimming pool is in the shape of a bat. It still has that. When they built the golf course, they had to change the specifications. And I'm not a golfer because Mays and McCovey would hit the ball so hard on the first shot that they increased the size of each of the holes because of those two guys. Chris, the book is terrific. Like I said, I'm about 2/3 of the way through. A lot of stuff that I guess none of us knew. I recommend it highly, and we're all Giant fans. Why not? And McCovey was a wonderful guy. He would sign autographs at spring training in his wheelchair, and always smiling. And in fact, I remember when he passed away, some of us sent donations. I forgot who it was sent to, but I remember, I'm sure everybody got a personalized card from his wife thanking for the donation. Another Giant legend kind of time. Norm, you got an extra tissue? No, it's true. But thank you so much for coming on, and I'm glad we're able to work this out. Technology, who needs it?
So, Chris, again, the book. Best way to get it, Chris.
Best way to get it is to email the publisher, University of Nebraska Press, but also, of course, Amazon. And I know Books Inc. is carrying it. And if you're a local, for the locals out there, Kepler's Bookstore will have it in stock.
Chris, you got to get the book into the Giant Dugout store.
They won't do it. They won't do it for me unless I license it, get it licensed. So, yeah, I know.
Anyway, let's all give it up for Chris Haft. Chris, we wish you not only the best of luck with the book, but the best of health, okay?
Thank you so much,
and
Gary.
Please don't be a stranger here. And like 18 of Mccovey's Grand Slams, once we got everything fixed, you hit it out of the park. So let's give it up for Chris Haft.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
And we will see each other in 2 weeks from tomorrow with Robert Cohn and his book on the 50 greatest New York / San Francisco Giants players. Until then, happy Valentine's Day, guys. Be nice to your wives, and ladies, I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's, whoever here. Take good care, and we will talk next in 2 weeks. Be good, everybody.